Okay. So hi everyone, and thank you so much for attending this morning's guest speaker series. I'm really excited to introduce everyone to a really admired colleague from my time at Vodafone, Damien Watts. He's a senior UX UI designer, author, researcher, teacher, and founder of Future Scouting, which is a resource hub for speculative and life-centered design. So he'll be taking us through some of these ideas today and help us understand how we might embed these strategies as designers within a business context. I'll leave the details to Damien, and I encourage everybody to hold their questions until the end unless otherwise specified. Thanks again for speaking to us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks a lot for the invite. Just checking you can hear me. You can see my screen. Okay, great. Thanks so much for inviting me along. I'm always excited to talk about this. This is design work that I do in my own time. So it's something I'm really passionate about. And whenever I share it with other designers, I see them get really excited about it as well. Just a quick agenda. So I do a little intro about myself, just to put things in context, and then introduce you to speculative design and foresight. And this is about designing for the future and how to apply it in business, just an introduction to that. Also then about how they fit into the life-centered design framework, which is an emerging framework that expands human-centered design to consider the impacts of what we design on the world, the environment, the animals, and people, non-users, like people along the supply chain. And if we've got time, I'll do a little quick exercise in Miro as well. So just a little bit about me. I'm a UX designer researcher. I've been a professional designer since about 2008, working mainly in digital product services like Weather Zone, Hotels Combined, Vodafone, and currently with the Australian government working in the export process. We're trying to speed that up, make that easier, which touches on sustainability and traceability as well, which is really interesting. So just to be clear, I'm just talking on behalf of myself today and my side hustle, Future Scouting. So not on behalf of any of the business that I work for or have worked for. I've been mentoring UX fundamentals through Harness projects, which is like a UX school. And then in my spare time, I've been researching the futures of design, like where is it going and what other practices are out there that allow us to apply design thinking to projects and causes that aren't just about profit. So as I said, I'm going to talk about these three different design practices. So it's going to be, if you don't know anything about them, a little bit of information overload. So I've tried to make it kind of really high level as possible. There's a few QR codes in some of these slides that you can scan and have a look at for more detail. And I'll share the slide at the end as well. But just basically, so speculative design is a way of imagining or speculating multiple possible futures. So at the moment, the future is not defined. It can go either way. It can get really bad. It can get really good. Might stay the same, or it might be somewhere in between. So it's all anything's possible at the moment. So speculative design helps us create visions of these variations of the future, so we can test ideas. And foresight is basically like the practical application of this speculation. Speculation uses a bit of science fiction techniques, but foresight is a way of articulating which is the preferred future and using more kind of business service thinking to map a path to the one that we want to go to from a more sort of business perspective. And then foresight is just one of about what I've identified as 11 design practices that combine in life-centered design, including human-centered design. And they combine in a way so that we can switch between them so that we can think beyond just the user and these digital experiences, even the physical products, and then what's the life cycle they fit in and what are their impacts. I'm going to pause at different steps anyway for questions, just to give your mind a break and also, just allow questions along the way. So speculative design, might just start with a little exercise. If you can put in the chat what you think this is, who uses it, and anything about its benefits or problems. I'm just going to switch to... I don't know if I can see. Jessica, can you read out any of the answers?
Yeah, of course. We've got a dog muzzle from Clint. Stops dogs from attacking other people. We've got VR for Doggos by Mitchell Marr.
Cool.
For Blind Dogs by Hope.
Nice. So basically what you're doing there is you're speculating. And that's basically what speculative design is. You think about what something is, its purpose, and speculative design is creates these sort of visions and prototypes that are at once familiar and a little bit unfamiliar. And they're meant to be provocative, meant to be they're meant to make you a little bit uncomfortable and excited at the same time. So this is actually called the M muzzle. It's just a speculative concept, and it connects the highly sensitive part of a dog's brain concerned with processing smell. But yeah, so these visions are usually strange but believable. They're meant to really provoke us so that we really think about what we're doing today. And that's just like science fiction. It makes us think about what we're doing today so that we articulate the future we want, and so that we start acting in accordance with that to make that happen. So yes, the speculative design combines storytelling with world-building techniques of science fiction to produce these provocative prototypes, or sometimes they're called prototypes. So how do we do this? Basically, we think about the futures as potentials and types. So this is called the futures cone. So it's a timeline going from left to right. And the dotted line across the center is the projected future. So that's what happens if that's what we expect to happen, and if nothing changes. And then slowly it kind of expands, possibilities expand out from there. Things that are probable, what's plausible, what's possible, maybe unlikely, and then there's the preposterous. And often at the top level of the cone is considered positive things. So that's more we're heading towards dystopia. And then the bottom half is more negative things. Sorry, the top half is utopia and the bottom half is dystopia. And what we do is just look for signals that we see in things today, and use futures tools to combine them to create visions of the future. You might think in terms of, create a product. You might want to think how it fares in different futures. You might design a future that's where things get better, things get worse, and things stay the same, and just test your idea in those three different futures. It's really important, even though it's about science fiction, it can seem a bit attached to fantasy. It is based in researching signals and patterns and trends. And it's really important because this is one quote that I saw a little while ago. There's only 10% of research and development explores the implications of new tech, which means 90% is about how do we make money from it. And only 10% really looks at implications, and half of that other implications. So half of that might be good and half that might be bad. And we've seen, there's sort of the negative impacts of things like social media, a lot of great things, but there's negative impacts as well. So I'm just going to share with you a project that I did to look at the positive and negative effects of mixed reality, which is basically what the metaverse could become. So this is about utilizing mixed reality, which is an extended reality. And there's three extended realities. There's virtual, which replaces everything we see. There's augmented, which just overlays things, like puts graphics in front of the world. And then there's mixed reality that actually blends these graphics within the world, and they react to real world things. So if you've got a graphic floating along and it hits the desk, it'll bounce off. So it has like spatial awareness. So that's mixed reality. And I wanted to explore what happens if we were immersed in that all the time. So I looked at signals. So this is the idea of what signals are. Signals are like technology, ideas, behaviors, just things that are going on in the background. And you look at various versions of them. You look at the nascent versions, something where it's just beginning. Then you might look at science fiction and film and look at what visions have happened. You're just collecting all these signals, and you kind of apply it to like a double diamond. So you diverge, get all these ideas. So the signals and trends that I found were a mixed reality contact lens that's being evolved by a company called Mojo. They're leading the way. Blink control, because how do you control a lens that doesn't have, it's completely hands-free? And filtering. So we've got a lot of filtering going on at the moment, in our Instagram and in our news. So how would that then filter into a visual technology? And so that's where I explored this concept through what was calling the lens, and this is something I was doing in regards to a book that I was writing for science fiction. And I started to actually, I'll show you an example. Okay, so this is a mock-up I did. And it's basically, if you imagine you're wearing a lens and you're looking at a screen in the future, climate's not looking that great. There's a lot of homeless. But you've got this lens, this bird is like your menu, opens the menu, and you control this menu at the top by blinking. So you might look at the weather, you might use a filter to make the weather look better. So you can just turn that on or off. And you might have that on 24 hours a day because you just want to see the world better. Maybe a filter that makes the city look a bit better and happier. Maybe one that allows you to see everyone's avatars, so people can actually hide in the real world in avatars. And perhaps there's some sort of predictive technology that learns about you. It learns from where you look, and it works out things you don't want to see. So it might change things. You might prefer that the world is always looking green. And you might notice there that it hides things you may not want to look at, which is like homelessness, and it might hide it and turn it into something that, it remembers you love seeing deer in Japan, so it hides them like that. And perhaps even virtual companions. So there's lots of ways that this could go. And as you can see, some things are really great and wonderful, and some things are kind of not that great. They contribute to marginalization. So I guess a couple of insights that came out of that. Like, let's think practical. One is there's a potential new extended reality, which is this alternate reality where everyone's seeing the world completely different. You might walk around and have a gold filter on and everything's gold. Someone else might see it all as trees and nature. So we'd be living in completely different worlds, but the same. Also, just insights in regards to how does blink interaction work, because that's only being explored at the moment for people with mobility issues, but we would have to then bring that into our apps, our devices. But then how can we flip it? How can we sort of flip the negative things? So maybe you can have an auto setting, and if you see someone that's in need, you can, look at them, blink twice, and send them some help. But a more commercial concept is helping people buy and consume according to their values. So you could have this overlay. You might be looking at two phones and you might think, what's the difference? But you can see the history of one. One might be coming from a place that's known of child labor, or it uses conflict materials, or its life cycle is only 1.5 years. So you go for the one that's more aligned with your values. So it's kind of fantastic, right? It's really fun and exciting. And that's where foresight comes in to kind of make things a lot more practical. So foresight speculates these range of possible futures, so that we can strategize goals and actions for preferred futures. So from a practical sense, you could map out a few different futures. Things get worse, things get better, things stay the same. And you could take your persona, using future tools, you could take your personas, your user personas, and see how they fare in those different futures. And one thing you could do with that is, if you find a common need that's strong across all those different futures, you could focus on developing features in your product for that. So your product becomes really resilient. You get ideas from the future. So it's about innovating features and products as well. And when you've kind of articulated that preferred future you want to go to, you can then do what's called backcasting, which is where you work out the milestones that need to happen for that future to happen, and then you can create a strategy for that. So foresight, which uses speculative design, is about innovation from testing the futures. It's exploring future opportunities, testing future impacts of design and business decisions, and backcasting strategies to the future you want to happen. And there's a QR code there, which leads to an article, which is just tells you about a few tools that you can start playing around with in your work today. So before I go on, is there any thoughts or questions at this stage? Okay, I'll take that as no, keep going.
We've I'll just jump in. We've just got a little chat going. Like, imagine shopping in Woolies where you've got these lenses turned on and you can see all the different ethical ratings between the coffee beans and how that would inform your decision. And then someone else has said, like who gets to rate those ethical ratings. So some really interesting concepts.
Yeah, also, and I love the fact that you're already questioning your ideas. It's really important that we question our own concepts. Okay, so I think that kind of, was there any more?
Jess?
Oh, yeah, sorry, beat me to a clint. I just thought that, yeah, your question about people having different levels of ethics. So who is that, I guess, core body that decides what is moral?
Yeah, actually, that's probably leads into this really well. So this is why we things like ratings of what's important are kind of being defined at different levels at the moment, but really at the global level, particularly with United Nations sustainability goals, so I'll just talk to this a bit more. So foresight, as I was saying, is one of about 11 different practices that combine a life-centered design. So I don't know if you've heard about this. It's really, really new. There's no real framework. There's a few proposed ones. I've created a speculative one. So I use speculative design to gather the signals of this and create a possible future framework as a learning tool. But it's really, really new. In fact, it has all these different names at the moment: planet-centered design, planet-centric design, 21st century design, circular design. There's a few different definitions there from other people that are working on this as well. But mine is basically life-centered design is emerging design thinking that expands human-centered design to be more sustainable and regenerative for all peoples, animals, and planet. And there's a whole bunch of tools that are already existing today to start doing this. But it's basically about really changing us from our linear product life cycle. So we extract all these materials, we make things, we give them to the user, and then most of the time it's discarded and it becomes waste and pollution. So it's about shifting this to a more circular product life cycle, where we minimize the materials we take out and we just try to reuse the ones we've already got. We design things so that everything's easy to assemble and you can remake and reuse, or fix it and resell it, gets reused again, or then the whole thing gets recycled and turned into something new. And by doing this, and taking this expanded life cycle view from rather than just the product and the user, we then have to think about the life cycle and its impact on the environment, and also the social impact of people along the supply chain, people in different countries. So they have work. Is it fair work over there? Is there child labor? That sort of thing. We need just to think about sort of that global impact. And it also is about becoming more regenerative, which is about giving back more than we take. So it's not just being sustainable where there's enough to keep going. It's like, actually, how do we use the energy and the prosperity of business to give back to the planet? So in this way, life-centered design actually aligns people like yourself, micro-level designers, with global goals. So businesses will attach them to global goals, and then everything that you do is can be connected to these global goals and connected to regenerating the planet. So as I mentioned before, these global goals are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. So it's about reducing poverty, hunger, ensuring that everyone has good health and well-being. There's a bit of a challenge to these goals that come from countries that aren't aligned with like capitalism and development, and they claim that these are really focused too much on constant development, and they have kind of their own variations of as well. So I think it's important to question these as well. But it's great at the moment. This is kind of a key thing the whole world can focus on. So this is where we can start to develop those ethics and morals together. So this comes together in what's called the donut economy. So this is a donut. It has two levels. The inner ring is the social foundation. It is the social foundation. We need to ensure that every human being stays above. They have all these things. And the outer ring is the ecological ceiling. So it's the planetary limits. So we don't use too many resources and create too much damage. And in between those two rings is this safe space for us to operate as humanity. And this is what we can aim for with everything we design. So just going back to this slide, if your business is aligned with the donut goals, then everything the designers do is contributing to that as well. These planetary boundaries are like scientifically defined. There's a really great Netflix doco on this, but these defined, I think, 10 or so years ago. These are like 9 boundaries of the planet that we need to make sure that we don't overstep. As you can see by the orange, we are already overstepping them. I think there was an article this morning in that we're overstepped another one. So it's great that we've got this to rate, but this is what we need to the donut, and working within the donut and this using sustainable development goals is a way to sort of make sure that we're not contributing to these getting worse. And the thing about the donut is that it kind of aligns with Indigenous wisdom, which is, so the outer ring, these planetary boundaries, we're making sure we don't use too many resources. That's about the relationship between people and land. And the inner ring is for the social level, is caring about each other, is about people and people. And these are the 2 key relationships that many Indigenous cultures recognized a long time ago as the 2 key relationships. So it's really taking us back to that, which I think is really important because it kind of threads Indigenous wisdom through what we're doing and reminds us to keep looking back at that. In my research with life-centered design, there's hardly any reference to Indigenous systems thinking and sustainability, and they've been doing that for tens of thousands of years. So it's really important just to remember that it's there and go back and have a look at it as a reference as well, because that's enriching us as designers, but it's also reducing the marginalization of excluding these people. So thinking, this is how it connects. So at the macro level, you've got the sustainability development goals. In the middle of the business, we'll set what I call ESG. So they set commitments to achieve those goals. And then you as designers use life-centered strategies to fulfill those commitments to the business. So that way it's just keeping you connected to the global goals. So I'm just starting high level just to put it all in context, but I'm gradually going to work down to the micro level designer where it's will make more practical sense for you, like what do you actually do? Just a little word on ESGs. It's another acronym. Now you've got SDGs, ESGs, but this is environment, social and governance commitments that businesses need to set. So it's voluntary at the moment in Australia, but it's compulsory, it's mandated now in the EU. And it just basically means every business needs to have commitments in their strategy that show how they share their prosperity to give back to the environment and society, and how do they actually embed it in their governance as well. So just to give you a bit of an example, Patagonia, fashion company in America. So they have some really great commitments. So they align with regenerative processes. So they use organic certified programs that also support welfare for people and animals. They use circular materials, so like recycling materials. And those 2 align with 2 sustainability goals, and that gives them their environment commitment. They have anti-racism in their business, like anti-racism program, and they support fair work conditions. So these align with those 3 sustainability goals, and that gives them their social commitment. And then they partnership with other businesses to make sure that all these are nurtured, and that's their governance commitment. So let's just talk about now what it is, as in what might be a framework. So I've had a look the last couple of years at what all these different people have been doing, different organizations. There's been a lot of different work, and it's moving really fast. There's new people contributing to this all the time. About 2 years ago, there was a few articles about life-centered design, one about conscious design. There's just bits and pieces, so it's moving really, really fast. There's some really amazing things. So a company called Vincent in Sweden or Norway, they've got this planet-centric design framework. And I spoke to a lady there just to ask about it. They've got like about 20 different tools, and a lot of them about stakeholder buy-in. So they're actually really good to have a look at from that perspective. They've been testing them out, so they haven't really got the chance to do the whole framework. They're just testing out tools with different projects and sort of developing that as they go as well. These are a group of people that I've met who are working on life-centered design, have been some since 2018, some just started the last year or so. Actually, no, I think all of them have been working on it for a few years. We've come together just to combine our research and see how we can give that back more to people. But these are just individuals just exploring it in their own time and space and sort of contributing back to the emergence of this thinking. There's the Future of Design Education. This is a group of very experienced and well-known designers and design thinkers. Don Norman, Leila Akrogi, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, Leslie Ann Knoll, and they're basically putting together kind of like the education of life-centered design thinking, or they call it 21st century design. So it's evolving just through people experimenting, creating sort of their own frameworks. You've got these really amazing designers and thinkers coming together to get into education. And then you've got businesses as well who are implementing this thinking. I've seen Woolies have got quite a few sustainable and inclusion initiatives going on as well. Zalando, I really love what they do. They're another fashion label in Europe. But they've really got this really great, strong balance of sustainability and diversity and inclusion. I recommend checking out their corporate site to get ideas there. So there's a lot going on from all these different angles. There's a lot of variations with what people are doing. So the scope, some people really focus on sustainability and not so much the social justice. Some are aligning with sustainability goals, some aren't. Some are using circular design. They're all using a different mix of different practices, and some are focused on more focused on physical products, and some and not as much digital. But they all have this common purpose, and that is foregoing profit-only design for design that also nurtures the relationships between people and people and land. So I started actually exploring this to develop a framework as a tool to share with people. And I started thinking about what's the difference between human-centered design and life-centered design. The key thing is that our stakeholders expand. So you're no longer designing just for the user and business needs. You've got to think about all those people that are involved in the life cycle, any animals impacted and any environments impacted. I know it sounds really huge and overwhelming, but there's ways to do this. And obviously not every project is going to be involved as all the others. But one way to sort of think about these stakeholders is using non-human and non-user personas. So just like user personas, but use them to represent, you might identify that, our company uses, a lot of paper. We're knocking down a lot of trees. So let's create a persona for trees, and we can have them on the walls around work. We can have them mixed in with our user personas, have them in meetings, stakeholder meetings, decision-making times, just to keep them in consideration. And you can use them for animals, environments, and people as well, which are non-users. There's, so what I've kind of identified as 3 design pillars to aim for. And these align with the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance goals. So at a product level, if you try to be inclusive and pluriversal is more than inclusion, but it's on a global level. It's understanding how people live in very different ways outside our own Euro-Western life. But if you think about these pillars in terms of every little project we work on, how can it be a bit more inclusive or pluriversal? How can I use design a bit more responsible and be a bit more aligned with other partners? And how can it be a bit more sustainable and regenerative? How can we kind of use the profit and energy we create and give that back? And using a responsive approach. So looking at what the user does and designing for that. So keeping human-centered design at the center, but zooming out and seeing how does that then impact the life cycle and the people and environments attached to that. Think about the past and future. What's the past impacts? And using foresight to then just check the impacts of your design decisions. And it brings together 11 key practices, which I won't go into, but just to try and pull that all together, a couple of graphics missing there. If you think about, we need to ensure that all the independent stakeholders thrive. And you can do that by aiming to uphold those 3 pillars. So in every project, how can you achieve these? And being responsive in the process. So focus on human-centered design and then zooming out. And you do that by using these different design practices. You'll switch between practices when you zoom in and out. So let me just bring it down to digital level, which is possibly more relevant to your work. And this is getting down to actual strategies that you can use. So how do you be more life-centered in digital design? So again, if we just think about those 3 pillars, if you want to be more sustainable and regenerative, look at your digital footprint, what's the carbon emissions that it's creating. And there's some really cool tools in that QR code. You can scan there in the article as well. Optimize the content for sustainability. So digital experiences, every image uploaded, every interaction, it's using energy and creating carbon. So how do you minimize that? And there's strategies for that. It's like using less images and videos and using more graphics and getting more on a sprite sheet. There's arguments for having less white screens because that's brighter and uses more energy. So there's a whole lot of real simple kind of UI things that you can think about and even embed them in your style guide. Advocate for the transition of digital channels to green hosting, so green web hosting. I looked at a year ago, it was very expensive for someone who's just like a small business, but there seems to be more affordable options now. So you could just move to green hosting, which is using renewable energies. And define a life-centered purpose. I've got a tool on my site. You can just apply that to anything, whether a business or a project, and it just helps you think about what are the impacts it might have, and then how do you flip that. Being inclusive and pluriversal. So human-centered design today, it still doesn't have accessibility and inclusion embedded in it. It's not something business is still kind of picking that up and championing it. And it's hard to retrofit. So life-centered design should have human-centered design that is by default inclusive and considers other people and builds accessibility into it from the beginning, bakes it into the style guide. Consider intersectionality, so you can have different experiences. So you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to design this for accessibility, but then someone might be gay, or they might be black, or you've got this mix of experiences to think about. Decenter yourself as the designer. So it just means really using more participatory design sessions. So really designing with the users, actually allowing them to design, just facilitate it, use your experience to guide it, and really get them to design their solution, because it really embeds their values in it. And know the non-users. So who are the people impacted? Who are the workers along the supply chain? Who are the communities impacted by your factory somewhere else? And then finally, being responsible and aligned. So it's about using like behavioral design to foster user stewardship, so that users can be aware of sustainable behavior and make those decisions. Zoom out and take a life cycle view every once in a while. Even though you're working at the micro level, there's no reason why you can't really develop that life cycle view. Apply a time lens. So just use some tools to see what would happen to your design decisions and how they might impact these stakeholders in the future. And know your privileges and power. So this is where it kind of gets more on a philosophical level, but it's like, what are you bringing to your design? How can you avoid embedding your values into it and forcing them upon other people? And what are your privileges that you may not be aware of? And how can you use them to actually help others who are less privileged? I've got an experimental tool for that as well, which helps you map the size of your privilege and then think about how to use it to give back to other people. I think this is something that I just put together last night, so I hope it's not confusing, but I see kind of 3 high-level categories of our strategies that we use. So whatever you do, you can restore the damage that we make. So our business goes along and it keeps harvesting trees, but we'll restore that. We'll plant new ones. But that's restoring damage. That's like curing a problem. We can reduce the damage we make. So perhaps we might use more recycled paper. So there's less to restore. Yeah, we're making less damage. But then there's enriching, where you're actually giving back. You're giving back more than you have to. Sharing the prosperity. Maybe use recycled paper embedded with seeds. So you're not only not using recycled paper, but you're actually creating more trees as well when the paper's tossed away. And go beyond that. You know, if the example, if this is about printed books teaching sustainability, which is what I do, I want to use less trees, you use recycled paper, but I also want to use the value that I'm creating, maybe give away free workshops outside of the books to people that perhaps can't afford a book. So then you're creating more resources, there's less to restore, and I'd be creating more awareness about how to do all this and perpetuate it and enrich everything. So kind of finally, I know that might be a lot to take in, but please remember, it's just a journey. Like, I'm still on this journey as well, and this whole thing is emerging and changing. It can be overwhelming when you first get into it and see that, okay, we're actually contributing to these major problems because we're just being profit focused. So life-centered design, though, it gives you the means to act. It gives you these actual tools. There's a really good book called Active Hope, and it's about moving from passive hope, where you really hope that things change, but then it kind of gets frustrating and scary, and you get angry and you turn all that stuff off and watch Netflix and get on your mobile phone. But this is about life-centered design. Actually allows you to tap into those frustrations and put them into actual action that's tangible and it's practical and it's measurable. And then by that way, we can then start changing what we do to contribute to these preferred futures that we want. I think finally, just find your place in it. So as I said, it's overwhelming, but just follow your interest. Check out those different design practices. There's one called interspecies design, and it's about considering animals. So if you love design, you love animals, you could just start exploring that. Experiment with it, play with it, have fun with it, because if you're having fun, there's no, it's easy to do. And be protopian, which is, you've probably heard of dystopia, where things are really bad. Utopia, where everything's amazing. But the problem with utopia is that everyone's idea of it is really different. It's probably not achievable. But protopia is where we're just always improving. It's not perfect, but we're always improving. So I might stop there for questions. If we have time, we could do a quick activity. I'll just pause now for questions.
Yep. If anyone has questions, just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll read from the chat. We did get a question from Harriet, who mentioned, as we learned we had a speaker last week, and one of the core concepts was that sustainability and ethical production is a privilege. So that manifests in different ways. So there are countries, like developing countries, that do have the manufacturing industry that don't have the capacity to be as sustainably minded. What happens in that case? Like, who has the responsibility for, I guess, pushing for these ethical values?
I think we just do what we can do. I mean, it's so awesome to hear you guys even think about other countries where our factories might be. We're already thinking systems wide and life cycle wide and global wide. I don't really have an answer to that. I guess it's just that's why I think the one pillar about being responsible and aligned. Okay, so that's what you're responsible. The impact you're having, what you're contributing to. So you've got to do something about that to the level that you can do it. There's some things we actually can't impact. But that's where being aligned comes in, because you can align with these partners. You can ensure that all your partners along the supply chain align with those values and contributing to that, or find ways for you to work that out. That's like a business discussion, I imagine, is how do you achieve that together?
Okay, cool. I have a question while I wait for others. So basically, taking on an ethical responsibility as a designer is a theme that we've been exploring for a few months now. And what a really common feeling is what you've mentioned before, is that feeling of hopelessness, in that some of the resources we had indicated that change comes from top down. So how do you recommend, just as designers who aren't in these leadership roles, what can we start to do to try and influence how, I guess, more senior leadership approaches sustainability when they're the ones that are making those decisions?
It's a massive, massive challenge, because I do think, and that's why I like to come at the bottom level and try to work bottom up, because I think we need to come at it from both ways. Things can take a long time at the top level. There's a lot going on at that level. But one thing I found is, you have to invest your own time. Sometimes you're being responsible as a designer, is you're just going to have to invest your time. Perhaps you can get an agreement with the business that you actually get a day a week to work on some of these things to develop them. If not, like, I started working on this in my own time. I've learned a lot, and I'm getting to share it with other people. So I invested in my time outside of work. I now find myself coming back to the business sector and sharing it back. I think to start experimenting, start small, maybe start with just the personas. If you do a bit of a life cycle session and work out who might be impacted, and you have those personas and you just start bringing them along, that can be we're seeing a few of the people that I work with in life center design in that group, they're kind of doing the same thing. So that can be a really good starting point. But don't let, if the business is allowing you time, you can still do it in your own time and bring it in different ways. You could just start exploring this one, like, how do you get sustainable content design in your style guide? It's a small, easy, and it sounds like it's very business related as well. So it's probably easy to get buy-in. So there's a few ideas.
Yeah, cool. Harriet, I see your name up. Did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Damon. Thank you so much. This was really, really insightful. One sort of thought that kind of comes to mind, and I'm probably oversimplifying this a little bit, but I don't know if you've seen the documentary Move Fast and Vape Things about Juul, and how they sort of had this product where they really wanted to solve smoking, and they had this e-cigarette, and they're like, oh, people could use this e-cigarette, it's going to help with lung cancer. And then once their business scaled, they ended up accidentally creating like teen vaping epidemic and selling their company to a tobacco company. So I think sometimes when I think about those like speculative futures, one thing that sort of happened, I think, whilst watching that documentary, is their idea, once it got to the scale phase and when there was investors involved and marketing started happening, this really good idea was marketed in the wrong way, which sort of led to, and I'm sure there are a lot of other things happening there, but I sort of think about that in organizations where sometimes what you might design, once it gets to the next sort of team or part of the process, can sometimes maybe not get implemented in the way that you had thought or hoped. And I'm sure that it happens in a lot of organizations as well. Do you have any advice on how, I guess maybe to design proof within your own organization, or how do you pass along those values from your designs, all the way through, once you've left an organization or it's gone on to another team?
It's a really good question. It's a really, really good question. It's impossible to know all the futures and all the impacts of your design decisions, but actually there's a really cool tool, and I think it's in this other article. Let me just grab it. If you scan that code, I'm pretty sure it's in it. It's futures headlines. So it's kind of a look at how it might be marketed. So you can kind of develop those. How would it be marketed in the future? So you've got this design decision, and then you turn it into a headline. Might help mitigate the marketing aspect of it. But yeah, I guess it's impossible to foresee everything. There's a thing called circular rebound. So when we're designing for circular design, it's kind of that. It's like, okay, now we just need to check the impacts. Like an example, you might create a product that uses more recycled, sustainable materials. Great. maybe only 50%, is kind of recycled, but then suddenly it makes the sales go up tenfold, and now you're actually using more virgin materials. So that's what I just think, like, the more that everybody, it doesn't matter what level you work on, product designer, business service designer, business owner, whether you're just starting design or you've been in it for 20 years, just start playing around with these tools, because we're all going to contribute to the emergence of this and refining them. So I just think it's a matter of just getting started and playing with them, doing the best you can, and then really importantly is sharing it back with people so we can keep learning from each other. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. But find something that you really love and interested in, just start there, I think.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's it for questions. If we want to do the Miro, up to you.
I think it's probably not enough time, but happy to set another session up some other time to try it out, because it's an experimental tool and I want to test it out. And the thoughts you were saying earlier, I think you'd probably really enjoy it. So we can talk about that later if you like.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'll work with Katie to work out a new time. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Damien. We really appreciate you taking the time just to go through these really interesting ideas. There's a lot to learn. Yeah, I'll let you continue on further reading.
I just want to say, I hope it wasn't overwhelming. So please, actually, if you can share any feedback, that'd be great. Maybe do that through Jessica or something, so I can make it the talk as helpful and meaningful as possible in the future. If you want to check out any of the work that I do, so I've got my Future Scouting Hub. There's a life-centered design tools and future tools. Some are experimental, just get in and play with them. And then a lot of articles and Medium where I just share things as well, which is kind of experimentation, looking at fringe design, and life-centered and future tools as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for inviting me along. I really appreciate it. And I do really hope that it's inspired you and you get something out of it. And yeah, please keep the conversation going. I'd love to hear where you go from here as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Damien. And we'll definitely reach out, because I think there's going to be a lot of people interested in that follow-up.
Awesome. Great. Thanks a lot.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Damien. Take care.